Hi, I'm Greg Yellen with Reynolds & Reynolds, and this is Connected. Today, we're kicking off Cybersecurity Month, and I get to sit down with Brad Holton. Brad's the founder of Proton Dealership IT. Brad's been with us as part of Reynolds since July of 2022, and surprisingly, you've only been on once, Brad. So I feel like every October for Cybersecurity Month, we should have you on, but excited to have you back and looking forward to chatting.
No, I appreciate it. And yeah, we've been a little busy since the acquisition, so we haven't quite got a chance to do all the things we wanted to do. But with all the work we put together to really integrate our teams, yeah, we've been pretty busy. But it's good to grab some time together.
Well, and plus you're everywhere, right? You can't make time for me because you're on, especially since like this summer, you're on CNN and you're on everywhere else I look. You're out there, pretty high demand.
Definitely a busy summer. I was not the summer I was expecting, not the summer my wife was expecting either. But yes, thanks to things that happen in the industry, pretty in demand for the specific knowledge that we have, as a group of not just automotive, but cyber, and being able to put those two together. And how does that affect dealers, and, kind of digging through all the intricacies. That it's really a very unique set of knowledge so yeah, when that happened, everybody came to us to try to figure out, what it meant and what to do.
Yeah. No, it's quite the series of events for sure. So, Brad, you started Proton in 2013, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so kind of a different world today than it was then. I was hoping maybe we could start looking back a little bit, and you could share, how things have changed. Obviously, it's changed a lot, but from your perspective, contrast 2013 to today, and kind of how different things really are.
2013, cybersecurity was really just it wasn't even a buzzword. It was kind of, something that was an afterthought. Nobody really paid a whole lot of attention to it. The main thing, even we were focused on when I started the company, was just the IT support, getting the dealers running, keep them running, making sure the DMS was up and they could get to it, and just all that sort of stuff. We didn't really, everybody had antivirus. You might have a spam filter, but that was about it. And, the hackers back then, the scammers, it was a fairly small operation most of the time. It was kind of the hoodie that you see living in his mom's basement. It wasn't the massive players you see now. So it was just kind of something you didn't really think too much about, and dealers really didn't pay a lot of attention to it at all. It wasn't until, I'd say, around 2016, 2017, we started to see attacks that were, far more devastating. Previously, if you get ransomware, it would start activating right away. So someone clicks on it, might be your finance manager, sales manager, service advisor. It usually just does damage to that PC and it stopped. Around 2018, we started seeing massive damage where it would not just damage that PC. And instead of immediately encrypting, it would actually start scanning and investigating and looking around the network. And it would take more of a long play approach. They would basically the hacker would get in and stay there for 2 weeks, figure out everything, and then deliver a catastrophic attack. So starting around 2018, you really started seeing a huge change in the way people were attacking. And instead of getting, 1 or 2 Bitcoins at the time was, maybe $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, you started seeing those demands upwards of 100,000. And of course, now you see demands, 25 million and up, or it's not unheard of. It's not even uncommon to see demands
Right.
that, north of $10 million. And the level of intricacy, the sophistication, the speed of the attacks, you're seeing millions of attacks a day instead of a handful of guys launching 1,000 attacks. You're seeing an army of individuals, well funded, sitting in nice office buildings in Eastern Europe, launching millions of attacks. So it's just a totally different environment than it ever was before.
Yeah, how do you think? Maybe you have a perspective, maybe you don't, but how do you think we got here, right? Going from $1,000 ransom to $25 million ransom, going to almost the normalization of this happening.
Sure.
And there's like this social perception that it's almost a part of doing business. And like there's a moral issue with that. There's, a legal issue with that, but it feels like it's almost normalized, which seems strange to me. I don't know if you have a perspective.
Well, yeah, so now, like I said, it used to be you had an attacker might be anywhere in the world, and it could be any individual. And, to some degree, there's still, groups all over the country, all over the world that are attacking. But the vast majority of it is coming out of Eastern Europe. And you're seeing it in areas where it's not illegal to do. So, if you have a hacker sitting in Sochi, Russia right now, he can attack the West all he wants to, and there's no repercussions. So, they even have software built into their toolkits that looks for the Russian keyboard being installed, or looks for an IP address that's based in Belarus or Russia or anywhere over there. If it sees those things, it deactivates itself. So the purpose is to make sure that they don't actually attack, any Eastern European countries. And by doing so, they're not breaking any laws over there. Any laws that they break over here and affecting us and Western Europe it's not punishable. Matter of fact, it's to some degree even encouraged. And as long as they assist the nation states whenever they're needed, then it's just kind of look the other way. They're basically protected. And so when you have, massive financial opportunity and gain, and you're protected from incrimination or any kind of punishment, I mean, you get this thing flourishing. And so you've got, North Korea, Russia, China to some degree, with just a massive group of intellectual guys and girls that are able to, run these attacks all over the world without ever threat of, being punished, and make hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So that's what you wind up with.
Yeah, that's really wild. So talk a little bit too, Brett, about the tactics, I guess, like how it's happening. So you mentioned a minute ago, just the volume of attacks just going up and up and up, and on a daily basis, seeing, hundreds or thousands of attacks or more than that.
Sure.
Talk about some of those tactics and just the sheer volume that we're seeing now.
Yeah, so I mean, it used to be, back in the earlier days that you would have for instance, an email attack. If someone's going to send out a phishing attack, they would write an invoice, a fake invoice, and send a fake email, and it would be, deliberately crafted. The whole thing would take them a day or so to put together, and then they would send it out to maybe 100,000 email addresses they got off some, dark web list. Now, what the way they build this thing out is AI will basically scrape the internet and compile a list of, we'll call it 5 million email addresses. They will then use that same AI platform to write maybe 1,000 different permutations of that email. So instead of seeing one email and then the company knows, okay, and our spam filters know this specific email is spam, let's block it. Now you're getting thousands of permutations, and you have to look at each email and look at the signature and try to figure out if it's spam. They're also using AI to disguise and to change the payload. So now you're seeing an invoice that has, some malware in it or links to other sites, and that invoice is being changed subtly and slightly in almost every single permutation as well, or iteration. So now you're using AI to create millions of emails going out in a matter of minutes using compromised email servers. You're using AI to actually infiltrate and do the hacking. You're using AI to create the emails, AI to create the malware. So that is kind of becoming the new norm that we're starting to see. It's only been in the last 6 months to a year. And just last week, HP identified the first actual kind of malware dropper exploit that was fully AI written. But I think, in 2 years or even, next year when we have this conversation, it's not going to be unusual to say, okay, AI is doing the entire attack from beginning to end. And we're seeing it millions of times a day. So the speed at which they can deploy this with the new tools, using those tools for good as tools for bad, you wind up with just a massive quantity of attacks.
Yeah, and that only adds to the I guess lack of moral issue, right? When AI is writing everything about it, somebody, a person, an individual, protected or not, that throws the morality right out the window, right?
Sure. I mean, all they're doing is just kicking off, an attack, and they just kind of give it some commands and it goes from there.
Right.
And as that grows faster and more powerful, they only need 1 out of 5 million attacks to succeed, and they can launch 5 million in a day comfortably. So, I mean,
and talk a little bit. So you mentioned earlier about spam filters, right? So that leads me to this other kind of, maybe it's a rabbit hole, maybe it's not, but thinking about, traditional spam filter, and you mentioned, being able to have different permutations of an email or of an attachment, so that spam filter doesn't catch it. Can you talk a little bit about how traditionally those have worked? Like, how do they function, and why do they struggle, I guess, in today's world?
Yeah, so email itself, it was never built as a really secure environment. It's almost like an analog phone system. Your phone can be spoofed. Anybody can make up a phone number and call you from an app that shows any phone number they want, because the phone system was never meant to be secure. It was never built that way. We just built it, since dial tones. Well, email is kind of the same way. There's a lot of different things that are inherently insecure in email that make it easy to spoof who it's coming from. You can change the display name. You can change header information. You can do some really interesting routing with emails to make it appear as if it came from inside a company and it came from the CEO, when it really didn't. It came from a Gmail or a Yahoo address. So because of that, that native kind of insecurity that's built into our platform that we haven't overcome yet, it makes it really easy for people to disguise where things are coming from. So a spam filter is only as good as the information coming to it, and only as good as the database it has. At the end of the
Right.
day, spam filters have generally just been have I seen this before? Yes or no. Does it have these characteristics? Yes or no. Is it good or bad? And then try to make a decision. And if you get overly aggressive with it, you wind up eliminating a ton of email that you need. And if you don't get aggressive with it, then you wind up with a ton of spam or malware or viruses. So it's this delicate balancing act of how aggressive can I be, without being overly aggressive. And we're starting to see now, just in the last year or so, AI being integrated under the tools for good, where you can now start to look at, what they call heuristic modeling of, what is actually the intent of the email. You can look for a lot more kind of unique things about the email characteristics and try to weed through it. So you're getting better at spam filtering, but it's a cat and mouse game because every time you get a little better at spam filtering, the bad guys are getting a little bit better at producing spam. And we say spam, and spam itself is just the act of a ton of email, but it's really the phishing part of that spam because spam could include marketing and things as well. It's the phishing
Sure.
pieces where you're trying to get someone to go to a bad website and put their information in, or you're trying to get them to give you credentials, or you're trying to get them to download a PDF or something else that has links in it or malware in it. And those are the ones that we're really kind of trying to make sure we can get knocked down. And like I
Right.
said, it's just a constant battle.
Well, and everything that I read, and you know firsthand, so I just want to confirm. I mean, really, email and phishing emails specifically. I mean, that's a vast majority of the starting entry point for any attack, right? I mean, is that a fair statement?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's north of 90%
Yeah.
starts with an email. So if you can knock that down, significantly, then you're hardened your environment a lot right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see a lot about employee training and things like that too. I mean, we do it at Reynolds, right? We get,
Yeah.
it's every, I forget the frequency, but it's fairly frequent that, we kind of have to go through this formal training and it's updated pretty regularly. When you're working with dealerships, what do you typically see or maybe recommend as like, what's the right cadence? How detailed should you be? Who needs to go through this type of training? We talk about the human firewall, right? I don't know if it's internal or if it's an industry kind of term, but having educated employees that won't click on the stuff that does make it through. What do you see from a training perspective as sort of the appropriate amount?
Yeah, we always refer to that as the human firewall, and that's kind of a term that's caught on somewhere in the industry here and there.
Yeah.
But the idea is that yes, you teach your people, to pay attention, to think twice, because you get a service manager or service advisor who's got people lined up out the door. He's just trying to get through his day, and he's got a ton of email, and he click, 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 and then he gets one that looks like it came from payroll, or looks like it came from HR that says, "I need you to click on this." He's not thinking twice. He clicks on it. Next thing you know, he thinks he's logging into ADP or whatever payroll system we're using, and they're not. He's giving his credentials to somebody else. And that hacker then immediately logs in, changes his bank account, direct deposit to a prepaid debit card, and his money up, the next payroll is gone. So, getting people to actually stop and think is the first part, beating that into their heads. No matter how, important, how much other stuff you have going on, stop and think about what you're doing and understand the consequences of your actions. But, having that training on an ongoing basis, typically once a month, having some sort of short tidbit of training. It doesn't really do a whole lot of good to train, once a year with a whole bunch of, take an hour out of your day and train for it. It's not going to matter. You're going to lose it within 30 minutes to an hour going back to work.
Yeah.
So doing little trainings, every month. And then, simulated phishing. We do a lot of simulated emails that go out. If someone clicks on it, then they get a little link that says, hey, you clicked on something you shouldn't have. Here are some things that were kind of indicative that it was maybe something you shouldn't have clicked on. Number one, you clicked on, something that said that your Chase account had been compromised, and guess what? You don't even have a Chase account, right? Or your Pandora account, you don't have Pandora. So looking, doing those things and kind of looking and following up, and then reinforcing that so that you get people used to that cadence of paying attention, and encouraging them to reach out to their IT or their cyber teams, making it very easy, and building a culture of it's okay to just completely inundate your cyber guys and your IT support guys with questions. We want all these questions coming in. Is this real? Is this legit? Should I click on this? If you're not sure, send it in. And if your IT guys are the ones that push back and go, oh, man, these guys are wasting our time sending us all these emails, well, then have a conversation with them and explain that, this is what you want. This is a culture you want. You want them just sending anything that looks suspicious in. Should I click on this? Yes or no? So building
Yeah.
that culture and getting people to pay attention to it makes all the difference.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it is hard though, right? In a retail environment, you're busy. Like you have three customers in front of you, the phone's ringing, somebody's on hold. Like you're busy. I hate to say it, but in so many instances, it's going to happen, right? We had Frank Abagnale at Amplify here like last month, and he talked for quite a while. But a lot of what he talked about was really, I don't know, it almost had this tone of, look, something's going to happen. It's really about limiting your exposure. He talked about, always using a credit card instead of a debit card. He talked about freezing your credit if you don't have a reason to have, ask for credit lines, like these simple things. But the underlying tone was, hey, somebody's probably going to get into either your personal stuff, your business stuff, like some type of event is going to happen, which is scary to think about, right? But I don't know. I've heard you talk about it, and I'm hoping you can elaborate on it. This concept of, if an event happens, or maybe when an event happens, how do you make it a 15-minute event and not a 15-day event?
Sure.
So I don't know. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit, because it is just this underlying concept that, all right, we have to be ready for when this does happen. Maybe it's not even
Yep.
if.
No, I mean, yeah, Frank's absolutely right, and that's something he really drills in a lot on. It's actually, I use a very similar topic when I talk at an NDA and various other places. That you remember the insurance commercials where you have mayhem, and it's like,
Yeah.
mayhem's always going to happen. You got to be prepared with insurance. So when I talk, I talk about stupid. You're going to have stupid in your dealership. It's not that you have stupid employees or stupid people, but people are going to do stupid things that they normally would never actually do if they were sitting down and logically thinking about things. I mean,
Sure.
I've worked with, brilliant individuals to recover from issues where they've done something, clicked on something that made no sense whatsoever. And when they look back on it, they say, I have no idea why I would ever click on that, much less then, answer follow-up questions and even have a conversation with a scammer thinking I was talking to our banker, because it just makes no sense when you're not in an emotional moment. But when
Right.
you're under pressure and you're trying to get something done and you're in the moment, you get this human nature to turn things off that are logical and to try to get through whatever event you're trying to get through. And it makes you do things that are not intelligent. So you can wind up doing something totally stupid you would never actually do in your life normally, right? If you're not under
Yeah.
that pressure. So
I mean, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
just figuring out, okay, we're gonna have people do stupid things, right? We're gonna have things that happen that should not happen, that are mistakes. So when that happens, if we've got the right tools, we've got the right processes, we've got the right people, we're monitoring everything, we're really kind of dialed in, then I talk a lot about it's a 15-minute, not a 15-day experience. Right? 15 minutes meaning, okay, finance manager clicks on something he shouldn't have, thought he was responding to an email from the controller. Now we've got something running on his computer. So it downloads, it gets intercepted by the management detection tools. You should have a good endpoint detection platform on there. So that endpoint detection platform sees that we've got a malware attempted to launch. It's going to intercept it, and we're going to isolate his computer. So at this point, he's now dead in the water. He can't do anything. The cyber team is going to take a look at it and say, okay, this is nefarious, or this is suspicious, or this is this is harmless, and we'll evaluate it. And then if it's harmless, then boom, computer's unisolated. He's able to go back to work in 10 minutes. If it is something that is harmful, then we'll probably need about 30 more minutes to kind of investigate the computer and see if there were any other additional processes launched or anything that it spawned, anything it left behind. But once that's cleaned up, he's back to work. If you don't have the right tools and the right processes, and you don't have someone monitoring this 24/7, then once that click happens, it runs in the background, it starts scanning his PC, it starts scanning the whole network. It does what's called privilege escalation, meaning it becomes, instead of a user, it becomes an administrator. Once it becomes an administrator, it then makes its way around the network, gets on everything, figures everything out, and then typically sometime after 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, it's going to launch an attack, a lot of times on a Saturday or Sunday. And when you come back in on Monday, every single computer is frozen. They all have messages popped up on them. None of them work. You can't do anything. And basically your entire environment's just been trashed. And at that point, you're looking at, I say 15-day, but that's conservative. I've seen it go 30 days and 45 days till really everything's back to normal.
Yeah. No, that's wild. So it's really about it when you're responding to something like this, right? It's really about, it sounds like, isolation. So getting that PC essentially off the network where it can't go harm anything else. You're almost, it sounds bad, but you're almost sacrificing that PC, that hardware, to make sure that nothing else is going to be
Yeah, I
impacted.
mean, it really is,
Right?
and there's multiple stages of the attack. And if you can catch something in that first stage of attack, when it's just landing on an endpoint, just landing on a PC, you can nip it in the bud right there. Like I said, it's not a big deal. You might have one employee that, has a bad 15 minutes or 30 minutes, and then everything's
Yeah.
back to work. Everybody's, back to their business, and we're going fine. But if you don't, then, it just really gets bad really quick. It
Right.
can be anywhere from a day to maybe 5 or 6 days where they're late in exploring the network. But once they decide to launch, everything goes down, nothing works, and it's gonna be a very, very painful experience getting it back up, and having to talk to the employees and explain, okay, we can't work, all the PCs are trashed or infected, and we've got to go either clean them up or wipe them or whatever we're going to do. But it's going to be very long lines at the service drive if they're even doing anything.
Yeah.
Usually it's a couple of days until everybody starts to get back to work at a trickle, and then by the end of 10 to 14 days, you're kind of mostly back to work.
Yeah. So how quick do you need to be? Right. I think about it, and you were talking earlier about AI, kind of launching this stuff and executing all these processes. When I think about that, I think almost instantaneous, right?
Sure.
Like, so how quick do you need to be to respond to this stuff? Let's say, an endpoint detection tool says, hey, over here, there's something bad going on. How quick do you need to be to make sure that doesn't spread across the network?
So instantaneous was a great answer.
Yeah.
But at least 3 to 5 minutes is probably a pretty good response time. If you've got the tools set up correctly, then a lot of the tools are going to respond instantaneously, and it's going to give you a little more breathing room. So, for instance, I'll give you two examples. There was a group that we were called in to work with maybe a year ago that had some decent tools in place, but they had set the tools to only alert their IT team. And the IT team, the alerts were going to an inbox that nobody was really paying attention to. It probably had 4,000 alerts in it that nobody even noticed. And we know every now and then they would log in and kind of clean it all out. And so in this case, the tools were set to not really take action on their own, just to let the IT guys know that there was a problem. And then the IT guys were supposed to log in and fix it. And that didn't happen. And they wound up with multiple locations, fully ransomware, everything shut down for quite some time. So we take the opposite approach. We are extremely aggressive, meaning that if something is highly suspicious, it doesn't need to be confirmed. It just needs to look highly suspicious. We're going to go ahead and intercept that process. We're not going to isolate the PC completely, but we're going to intercept that process and really do a deep dive into what's going on with that process. If it looks, malicious, confirmed, then we will go ahead and take the PC down, and that'll all happen automatically. So as soon as you click on it, we're going to get that detection within 5 to 30 seconds. At that point, the PC will then be, either just the process will be neutralized or the actual entire thing will be isolated. And it's all under, we'll call it 45 to 60 seconds.
Wow.
Then you'll have the alert that goes into the NOC or the SOC that allows us to then investigate that. And that's usually 3 to 4 minutes from there until somebody's actually looking at it, diving into it, and then deciding whether it is malicious or how malicious is it, or what was it, what was the intention of it, what was it trying to do, and what do we need to do to back that out and put everything back the way it should have been.
Yeah, man, that's wild. Just like, even just talking through it, it makes me anxious. It makes me anxious about even my personal computer at home, and just and your whole life's on these devices. It's just wild. And if you think about, I don't know, my mind goes these places where all right, Chrome saves every password that I have for everything, right? And if somebody logs in or is able to access that, like it's pretty terrifying. It really is.
So just a quick heads up, by the way, the Chrome is so easy to dump those in clear text to a hacker. There's so many tools out there that just, as soon as they hit your PC, they dump all those and export them. We did that for a dealer group a couple of years ago that was told by their internal team, yeah, they're fine, they're secure, no problems. They got our name from a 20 group and asked us to take a look at it. We did an assessment for them, and we were able to dump the passwords off their IT manager's computer fairly quickly. And it was just the same thing. Just run a quick little tool, dumps all the Chrome browser passwords, internet, Edge as well. All that stuff stored in plain text. It's encrypted, but it's easy to decrypt, basically plain text.
Yeah.
So maybe a password manager that's fully encrypted tends to be a better solution.
Yeah, and once that happens, I mean, it doesn't matter where, the rest of it doesn't matter, right? If you can access the network and you have the passwords, you can pretty much do whatever you want, right?
Yeah, and what people don't even think about is, if we get an attack on a dealership and there's 50, we'll call it 75 people in that dealership, and this thing scans, the first thing it's going to do is scan all the computers. So as soon as it gets domain privileges, it's going to scan all of them. It's going to dump every password out of every browser. So even your service manager who's been going to his banking site, he's been going to his, HR, homeowner association, whatever, anything he's gone to that he's saving the password in the browser, he's now exposed on all that within his personal life, as well as everything that relates to the business. So a lot of people don't realize the depth of employee exposure when you get a hack is not just their social security number and their payroll information was hacked from payroll. It's all the other stuff that they did while they were in the dealership that has been stored on that computer. And God
Yeah.
forbid they have an Excel spreadsheet on their desktop called passwords that has every single password in it. And you laugh, but I have seen it so many times. It drives me crazy when I walk into a new dealership and sit down at a controller's PC and there's a Excel spreadsheet called passwords on the desktop.
Yeah. Well, and thinking about too, I mean, just going back to that Chrome example, right? Maybe your service manager didn't even log into his US bank site, but if he uses Chrome and he's logged into Chrome, Chrome has all that stuff saved from when he accesses it at home, right?
Yep.
Like, doesn't even matter
Yeah.
that he was on that site or not on that site. If he's logged into Chrome or whatever browser that has those passwords saved, they're there.
Yeah, we see that all the time where employees will come in and they'll log into Chrome with their personal information, personal account. And then if they're terminated, we go back to the PC and you're looking at their Gmail, you're looking at all their personal bank, all their passwords are all right there. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely that whole, process is just a little risky for personal information.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. One of the things, Brett, I wanted to get your perspective on while I have you, fairly timely. It's hurricane season. We just had a bad one in the southeast for sure. And we were talking about it a little bit earlier, and just hoping that everybody's okay. But how do natural disasters and things like that impact the cybersecurity landscape? I would imagine that there's if nothing else, new ways for people that are phishing and sending out these emails to try to get into a network or to get people to click.
Yeah, there's a lot more social engineering you see anytime there's an event in the headlines. For instance, this past summer when we had the huge, cyber outage that affected the automotive industry, we saw
Right.
tons of attacks that were related to kind of playing on that, impersonating, or, just language. All the emails that were going out were about that. And therefore it kind of made it much more likely someone was clicked on it. So whenever you see a hurricane, you see, a lot more emails come out that are purported to be maybe the Red Cross or, different charities, different aid groups, and they're trying to get people to click on that and put in information, phishing information, things like that, or charity scams. We see a ton of that. But it's also an opportunity for malware and hackers to come in and just anything that's a hot topic that they think you're going to click on, that you're more incentivized to click on because it is something you've just seen and it plays an emotional part of what you're reacting to that's going on in your life, is
Well,
much
isn't
more
that
likely to click on.
yeah, and isn't that really the anchor of this whole concept of phishing and those types of things? Is it's all about emotion, right? It's all about creating false urgency. It's all about every bit of it is about emotion, eliciting that emotional response.
Yeah, one of the things that I've kind of tried to beat home to people is, as we were talking about earlier, you're slammed at work, you've got all these
Right.
things going on. The expected response time for an email from someone who sends an email on average tends to be measured in hours. All right. So if someone sends an email, they typically expect a response that day, or sometime measured in hours, not measured in minutes. Text messages, things like that, we tend to expect more immediate response. That's going to be in a couple minutes. So it's not necessarily that urgent that you respond to every single email as fast as you think you should. All right. It is okay to kind of sit down, slow down, evaluate what you're doing right now, evaluate priorities, and then respond in a way that you can be clear-minded and think about what you're typing and what you're reading before you respond to the email. And getting people to understand and prioritize their time and not get in that panic. There was an article I read just the other day where a guy lost his entire life savings, $450,000, to a scammer, and it was a social engineering scam. It started off with an email, and then the emails led to phone calls, And it was like, hey, call this number. You owe something in back taxes. And he just kept going and going and going until the guy was like cashing out everything he had and putting it in packages, and they were having Uber pick it up, telling him it was, I don't remember what the story was. When the guy looks back on it, he's like, I have no idea what I was thinking, but it was so urgent and so critical. They got my emotions so riled up that I did whatever they told me to do, even though logically now looking at it, he's like, I couldn't believe how stupid I was. So you're right. It is all about emotion. If they can trigger those emotional, responses, then that outweighs logic every time. And you wind up, it's like Pavlov. You just wind up going on emotion and, reacting to core nature rather than, thinking with your brain.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you mentioned email and the response times, and it's crazy because we have so many methods that we get pinged on email, right? You got your AirPods in and it interrupts whatever you're listening to tell you that you have an email, or, your watch dings because you got an email, or your phone dings. And it's, I don't know, your work stuff can certainly be connected to that. So, you can often get caught in an environment where maybe you aren't thinking clearly, right? You're not sitting at your desk, right, or at your computer and kind of in that clear headspace. You're off doing something else, and you get pinged on it, and it's like, oh, I'll just respond to that real quick, or I'll click on this real quick, and having that front of mind where every time you're going to click on something, you have to really kind of think through it.
Yeah, and to your point, it is much easier to get tricked on a mobile device than it is on a desktop. On the desktop, when you're looking at it, you have all the data there. All right, you've got a bigger screen, you can clearly see everything. You can but on a mobile device, because to your point, a lot of times you're doing it in between 10 other things. And,
Right.
It looks fairly normal. The logo is small, so you can't really tell the logo is slightly off, or you don't notice, that someone is addressing you as dear sir or madam, and this is your buddy. All right.
Right.
So, because you're just kind of flying through and you're flipping through it with your right thumb while you're ordering a Starbucks coffee, or, in between while you're on a podcast, right? I mean, you got it over here, you're kind of multitasking. And so people tend to multitask far more reading email on their phone. They're far more likely to be susceptible to a scam or a malware, something like that, the phishing attack on their phone.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, Brett, one other thing I wanted to get your perspective on. You've worked with a lot of dealerships over the years, obviously in this IT space, in this cybersecurity space. The last couple of years have been, crazy for you, I know. But when a dealership's thinking about, building out a plan for their store, whether that's starting from scratch, which hopefully nobody is at this point, or it's, evaluating where they're at today and then figuring out what else they need. I don't know. Is there a brief checklist in your head, just some things that people can think about when they're thinking, okay, it's probably time to make sure that our bases are covered on this? Is there a checklist or a process, or how do you go about really building a plan and evaluating where you're at?
So, I would say start with a general incident response plan, not necessarily a cyber response plan, just incident response plan.
Okay.
So, a perfect example is, we've got a ton of dealers in Western North Carolina and Georgia, that now have no power, no internet. We're trying to figure out how to get them back up. Power, not much we can do unless they can get a generator in. Internet, we've got hotspots, we've got VSAT, we've got Starlink, so we can spin up Starlinks wherever we need to. But kind of figuring out if something happens to my dealership that prevents me from doing X, Y, or Z, and X, Y, or Z happen to be critical functions. So I don't have internet, I don't have DMS, I don't have power. What am I going to do? Let's start with those things and kind of work through all the permutations and variables of how do you overcome those obstacles. Then, you can kind of talk through the more nuanced things of, okay, so now I have a cyber attack, which has taken away my ability to do one of those things as well. My computers don't work, or, I don't have access to, my firewalls got hacked. I mean, you can take out physical equipment as well. There's all sorts of different attacks. So as you're looking at that, you kind of identify, how many different ways can my dealership be attacked or be subject to outside influence and outside events that prevent me from being able to do my job. And on the cyber side, simply having a response plan, which, any emergency, break glass, pull it out. All right, we've detected malware. What do we do? We're going to call the IT guys. We're going to call the cyber team. Hopefully you have each one of those teams in place. And those typically are very different teams. IT guys, in the automotive world, IT guys, we'll call it keep the engine running. Cyber guys, keep the door shut. All right, so the IT guys typically are really good at desktop support, understanding basic networking, things like that, understanding installing applications. Cyber guys, totally different mentality, totally different skill set, totally different training. They're looking, how to prevent things, how to detect things, and those guys are dialed into a totally different world than your IT guys. If you have the same people doing it, that's probably a problem, because there's just no way that that skill set is usually carried across, in one individual. So, building out, notifying those guys, and then notifying your attorneys, your insurance company, even PR. You got to figure out, how am I going to control this? What's gonna happen? How is it going to be viewed? What's the news going to say? Because it does happen.
Sure.
So there's a lot of steps that go in, and thinking it through ahead of time. Coming to the table, because it is going to happen at some point. It's not something that, it happens sporadically here or there. It happens all the time. And no matter how good you are, you're going to have something happen, in your dealership, unless you've really, really done a great job of getting the right pieces and people and processes in place, in which case the hackers are going to go to the easier targets. All right.
Yeah.
If you're buttoned up really well, then they're going to go look somewhere else, because it's much easier to find groups that are still using Windows 7, and don't have firewalls and don't have teams in place and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess to boil it down, force yourself to ask the questions before you're in a situation, right?
Sure.
And just kind of have an idea of where you need to go before you get there, sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, kind of run through almost like role playing, or, doing events where you've kind of gone through the stages and figuring out, I said not just cyber, but just about any incident. It's definitely worthwhile, so that when something does happen, you've kind of already got a game plan of at least the basic stuff, how you're going to address everything, who the players are, who needs to be involved in making the decisions, and all that sort of stuff.
So this is going to sound probably ridiculous to you, but is that a Sunday morning exercise? Bring in donuts for everybody. It's one of those things that's very important, right? And it has to be done, and you have to do it, but it's so easy to push it off till tomorrow or next week. And I think back to, honestly, when I was a kid and doing inventory, physical inventory in the parts store, right? And we'd all come in on Sunday morning or Saturday morning and, have donuts. We get there at 6 a.m. and try to be done by 10, just getting through everything, right? And everybody get their sheets of paper. You'd partner up. You'd have a clipboard, and you'd go through and you'd circle how many there were. And you did it. You just hammered it out. Yep. Is that a time to do this where it's like, okay, no other distractions. This is what we're doing this morning. Let's just hammer through it.
Yep. I mean, once a quarter, I think is probably a great way to just revisit it. Once you kind of go through the pieces, nothing really changes a whole lot. The names are going to change. All right, who's my current, person that's in charge of this, but the position and the role and responsibility is going to stay the same. We typically don't recommend building out 50-page documents, that goes into every single thing you're going to do, because it's going to change so much that by the time you need it, it's going to be completely outdated. But, putting together a couple of pages of, okay, here's a high level. Who's going to be responsible for what? What are they going to do? How are we going to address this? For any kind of disaster that might hit, including cyber, certainly is worth doing once a quarter. So,
no, good thoughts, good information. Well, Brad, I definitely appreciate your time. I want to be super, super respectful, though. Anything else that we haven't talked about that we should? Anything I didn't ask you that we should? Anything you want to touch on?
I mean, I think we had a pretty good conversation about everything that's going on. It's just, it's a crazy world, and I like to say I've got job security, unfortunately, because, it is only getting worse and worse, every month I say that, or every 2 months or every quarter. And then I shake my head and I go, oh my God, it's only getting worse and worse, and the tools that are coming out that are being developed for, that can be used for good and amazing things, can also be used for horrible things. And so we're going to see, the attacks getting far more nuanced, far more detailed, far more specific, and far more aggressive, and just going to see millions and millions and millions of them. So if you're not paying attention to this, you're going to be, you're going to pay attention at some point when you have to.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, Brad, thank you so much for chatting. It's always a pleasure. Thanks for making time. Brad Holton, founder of Proton Dealership IT. Hopefully we can talk again soon.
All right. Thanks. I appreciate it. It's good talking with you.
All right. Thanks, Brad. I always enjoy getting the opportunity to talk with Brad Holton. He's a wealth of knowledge, and he's got a lot of great experience. Hopefully this conversation was good for you and enlightening, and a good way to kick off Cybersecurity Month. Before we hop off here, don't forget to watch or listen to all episodes of Connected on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify podcasts, and make sure to hit subscribe so you're notified every other week when new episodes are released. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.